to say something too controversial, but it's what I believe.
This is a safe space for controversy.
We're making the movie on Jenny Lozano, and it's been a true privilege to follow her journey behind the scenes, behind what people see in the headlines.
And they don't make cowboys in the U.S. like they make cowboys in Mexico. And so now he's all, wait a minute, don't deport my cowboy. So January 13th, 2025, it's the first full moon of the year. And the moonrise today is at 5:56. And you said, like, hey, what kind of time do we have? Mm-hmm. Some people have tea times. I got like wheels down time. Wheels down time tonight is at 7 p.m. And my buddy...
Wheels down meaning...
Mountain biking. But it's a full moon night ride, which is a trip. So we're going to go out to Lake Casablanca. We got this big moon. The sun will have already set. And there'll be some twilight, but it's going to be headlamp and handlebar lamp, and then this glorious full moon. All the javelinas come out, and the deer come out, because it's kind of like in between day and night.
Is there enough light to bike, or do you need lights?
with the headlamp and the handlebar lamp, you can turn night into day, especially in combination with the full moon. So,
okay.
But that being said, it's not every day you get to interview someone that won an Emmy, right? So when and I can tell you just very personally, when I found out the good news about your Emmy, I was like, this could not happen to like a better person. So proud to call you friend and to have you here in the studio to be talking about this young lady that had a vision, that chased her dreams and never gave up in spite of all the odds, right? Because those are, classic mythic structure. Like those are the best, those are the stories worth telling.
Right. And could you tell us a little bit about yourself, Karen?
Yes. Well, oh my goodness, what an intro. Thank you so much. Yes, well, my name is Karen Gaytan. I'm just a young girl from the border living out in the big city in New York City. And I was very fortunate to have recently been part of a team that was recognized with a News and Documentary Emmy for science and technology storytelling. We did a docuseries called Science Fair, the series, where we followed the brightest young minds in science research, high school students that are competing at a really prestigious competition, conducting graduate level research, trying to solve things from why is there such a high rate of adolescent suicide, and why is there very little understanding of why it's happening? Kids that are trying to find better ways to produce our food as the future forces us to live more sustainably, and kids that are the kid who won, Robert Sansone, who invented a motor for electric vehicles that does not rely on rare earth materials, because even though we do have a lot of electric vehicles, the reality is that the production of them is still very extractive, and it's still taking a lot of out of earth. So it was a very wholesome, really inspiring journey, really a true privilege to get to take a passenger seat in, next to these kids telling wonderful stories. And now we have this trophy for it.
How did you get involved in that? I mean, how do you go about getting involved in something like that?
So I've been working in film production for about 10 years, on and off. Full-time in documentary production since 2020. So it's about to be 5 years now. This particular project came about through a job board on Facebook through a group called Brown Girls Doc Mafia, which is a group of badass women and women of color in the documentary space that are trying to build power, like give each other gigs and jobs. So the director, Cristina Costantini, who lives in LA but is originally from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, posted like, hey, I need an associate producer that is bilingual, that is based out of New York. And one of my best friends, Gabby Treviño, who also a Laredoan, former reporter, LFS co-founder.
And LFS is?
The Laredo Film Society.
Okay.
So we'll get into that in a minute. But Gabby tagged me in this gig. It was around mid-December. And I followed up with Cristina, sent her a DM, a direct message on Facebook. Hey, I'm really interested. I have this experience. Didn't hear back. for like a week. So I followed up. Hey, is it still available? Yeah, someone from my team will reach out. And it's not until like a month later that the producer I worked with, Christopher Rios, New Yorker, New Yorican, he's from Puerto Rico, lived in New York, interviewed me. And
so in that kind of classic Tarantino structure, right? We have this Emmy, right? You can imagine the Emmy, and I sat down with Karen and I said, okay, so tell me about the Emmy, and she says, well, the story actually begins, and then we got to go back in time. So tell us about the young lady with the dream, while I work on getting everybody a little bit of Montelobos mezcal.
Yes, of course. Well, I think, as I was telling you earlier, my story really begins when I'm 14 years old. Thank you very much. I was a young high school student at Alexander High School. Go Bulldogs. I was in the magnet for medicine, and a kid comes to my class and tells me about this leadership program that really increases your chances of getting into a really good school. And only the best of the best Latinos are able to attend this program. So I'm like, okay, well, it sounds compelling. The program is called the National Hispanic Institute. It's a leadership program. The organization is called the National Hispanic Institute, whose mission is to foster leaders and leadership among Latinos. Because by 2050, Latinos are going to be the majority of the minorities, the major ethnic group in the United States. But there really isn't a structure to cultivate leadership, visionary leadership. So I go through debate programs. It starts with a debate competition, then a mock legislature program, and I become really passionate about my involvement through that organization. I think it fostered a sense of civic responsibility, a sense of purpose, like spiritual purpose, living collectively and thinking of solutions. Made some of my best friends there. And to make a long story short, basically this program asks kids to ask themselves what their purpose in life is. What are they dedicating their life to? And then it trains them with the skills to be good citizens. You know, you have to learn how to communicate. You have to learn how to manage projects and do them in ways that are efficient, that are creating a common good. And they really ask people to question how they look at themselves and how they look at their communities. Through the process, we find that a lot of people, unfortunately, see their homes and their communities as these deficit places that need to be saved by the man or the system. And it does a good job at shifting that mentality, that mindset from a deficit-based point of view of, you know, like seeing our communities as these horrible places to seeing our communities as these places full of life and capable of thriving. And that's where the story begins.
And we tell ourselves, you know, Carlos and I were both lawyers, you know, and you know, our parents tell us this, and maybe we've convinced ourselves along the way that, you know, you need to have a job that has, you know, technical expertise so that you can help, you know, make the world a better place, right? And certainly the law is a vehicle for doing that. And in many ways, your upbringing, your dad in particular, you know, instilled in you and your brother and your sister this, like, you need to get a degree that an education that can be monetized. I don't know if I'm using the right word. Mm-hmm. And but it was in NHI where you had this moment of clarity about art and the arts. Can you tell us a little bit about how that how you had this epiphany?
Yeah, so we may be jumping a few steps, but basically this program begins, right? And they're telling young high school students that they're capable of greatness and that their communities are capable of greatness. A lot of my peers naturally, because it was a debate competition, went into the policy route. So a lot of them, you know, a lot of them running for office, a lot of them pursuing law degrees themselves. But I looked at my community, Laredo, and I don't know. I mean, it could be because of like the history of corruption or a lot of like the negative narratives that are associated with politics here, where it became clear to me that what we need is a spiritual transformation. And that, not to sound too kumbaya and like, everyone's like very hippie, but
Yeah.
no, we really need to see our home as this place that is worth of good growing things. And policy didn't really give me that. Even though I'm sure there's great public servants out there that are putting forth, good messages. To me, it felt that the only place that could collectively get us toward that was filmmaking, was the arts, was like movies, storytelling. I started, so, well, through NHI, I think through NHI, I learned that I needed to see my community as a place where good things could happen and see it measure it, value it through its assets, not its deficits. So I came back to Laredo.
And I think us as Laredoans, me in particular, are just so guilty of drilling down on the things that we don't want. And if we put the same amount of energy into the things that we don't want, into building the things that we do want, that we could have that paradigm shift. And like watching, for instance, Lisa Cigarroa and what she's done with Daphne in a short period of time, with with a lot of the public art that local artists have done in creating these spaces that are so uniquely Laredo, that people now go out of their way to go get their picture taken in front of, and they've become, if it was back in the day, it would have become things that would have been put on a postcard, right? But even Carlos and I have talked about how in our show originally we started off with air quality, water quality, and there's lots of reason to be sad about that and upset about that, and the political system. But even kind of going into 2025 now, wanting to upshift into a higher gear to really talk about the best of Laredo. And of course we had Keith Franklin on last week, and Keith, fundraising for all these great causes, including the Laredo Film Society,
yes.
Right? He's, I guess, y'all's in-house lawyer, and you all and many others really do bring out the best in us, and so we're thrilled to have you. Tell us about your character arc. So talk to us a little bit about how you ended up from Laredo and you ended up at St. Edward's, and then you ended up back in Laredo. Let's cover that chapter.
Right. So all of my friends through this program are incredible people. Went on to study at Harvard, at these very elite colleges, Ivy Leagues, and I ended up applying. Senior year came around. I ended up getting some type of scholarship for St. Edward's University, a first-year scholarship. And
mind you, during this whole time, you and your family are here on a visa.
Yes. So a crucial part of my story is that I'm Mexican. I was born in Mexico, moved here when I was 10 years old through my dad's visa. At the time, the trade agreement gave us an E2 visa during the, I think it was during the Bush administration. And by the time Obama comes around, that program didn't really exist, so we had to change visas. And my high school time here was always under this like dark cloud of my status, my immigration status. I was already living here, and legally, we were never undocumented, but the process itself is not very friendly or conducive to building a lifetime. It's always with a timestamp. So by the time I go to college, I had to transfer to a foreign exchange student visa, an F1, and that limits basically your possibilities of getting financial aid. I don't know why I thought it would be a good idea to go to a private school that costs like $40,000 a semester. But I thought, hey, like they have a good history, a track history of funding, of giving aid to like lower income students, working class students, lower middle class students. So maybe, once I'm there, I can prove myself, I'll get more aid. Not knowing that, well, I mean, I knew that I was on a student visa, but not knowing how much harder it was, how much harder the system makes it for foreign exchange students to get financial aid. So once I'm there, I'm knocking on every door. The university advancement, I try to become a resident assistant so that housing couldn't be would be covered, and like every door was closed. So after,
because you needed a work visa,
right,
not just the student visa.
exactly.
So how did you get by?
Well, I didn't. I had to come back. I think for a while, I think my last semester, we had a very good family friend, with citizenship, co-sign a student loan. And that way we were able to, pay for school that way. But 3 semesters in, after basically trying every possible avenue, and wanting to study philosophy, which my dad was very much against, didn't understand. He's like, philosophy? Like, we're paying all these thousands of dollars for you to, like, think and philosophize? Get out of here. Like, super against it. That was an uphill battle to convince him on the value of that. He eventually came around, but
The philosophy
yeah,
helped.
yeah. Well, I think philosophy is like the best thing you can study. Frankly, great artists have thought. Like Alfonso Cuarón, I later learned studied philosophy, or Zetangana, a really Spanish musician, who's
Some of the best lawyers study
Yeah.
philosophy. And but I guess you were talking about how you needed a cell phone, and so you started baking cakes.
that was in high school. So, my family is very hardworking. No matter what the odds are, like, the world's going to say no to you. You don't say no to yourself. You figure it out, and you talk to everybody. You knock on the door. You don't say no to yourself. So when my sister was in high school and I was in middle school, I wanted to, fund my programs to go to these leadership camps. My sister was a huge soccer fan, has always been, and, wanted to, get herself a cell phone and wanted to buy like new uniforms. So what we would do is we would make chocoflanes. We would sell, we'd bake them at my house, and then we'd go door to door with our neighbors and, hi, yes, I'm Karen, this is my sister. We're trying to like raise funds for our tournament. Can you support us? Sell them for $20. And sometimes people, 10 times, like 9 out of 10 people close the door, but then you get the one person that's like, I'll take 2.
Yeah.
So, it was amazing. Hard work, but it was our only option, Like, the other option was like, pues, quédate sin teléfono, quédate sin hacer lo que quieres hacer. So we just had to figure it out.
And you were saying that along your family's journey and your journey, that food has been so centered to everything.
Absolutely.
Tell us about that.
Yeah. So, we moved to the States. My dad was working at an import-export warehouse. He was in a manager role. And then, as the roll of the dice has it, that opportunity fell through. So we were in a really tricky position. Then he tries to start a business, and things like, during a few years, financially, things were looking really, really dark for us. It was around this period that we're selling the cakes. So my brother and my mom start selling plates, just like enchiladas, chilaquiles, salads, to the warehouse district in the Mines Road area. I don't know what the other industrial park is, by like Shiloh, at the end of Shiloh. Mm-hmm. But we just go like, hey, like, here's a menu, here's food. You want to buy it for $7? And all these workers that are like going in super early and leaving really late, that have only McDonald's around the corner, they're like, yeah, sure, come. So they sell 8 plates, and
On credit.
To
the employees.
And this must have been, I was already in high school, because I remember the reason they started selling the food was because we were trying to plan a family trip with other church families. They were really close to my parents, and they wanted to go to Orlando. We had never been to Disney. And they're like, okay, well, let's do it. Let's try to like make some money so we can all like rent this house and go get the tickets, blah, 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 Mickey Mouse. And we did it.
And then that ended up becoming a business.
It ended up becoming our livelihood. Yeah, it basically saved our family. My dad was trying to figure out his thing. It wasn't really coming through, but then my mom and my brother really, put their best minds together. They saw that after a week or 2 weeks, like, oh, hey, people are actually ordering more. Okay, let's do it. And then all five of us went into it. My sister was in college at the time. I was still in high school. It was a summertime, trying to raise funds for my NHI programs. And it was all hands on deck. They'd have me answering the phone calls, and I'd be making the lemonades. And it was sort of like, I think like dealing with hungry people, if you can like calm a hungry person down, you can deal with anybody.
Yeah.
Because people were like, ¿Dónde está mi comida? Y, ay, vamos para allá, sí, no, y ¿qué más quiero ordenar? And, just always keeping a smile on and, like, trying to, like, really listen to clients and empathizing with where they're coming from. And on the other end, be like, apúrenle con la comida. Like, where is it? Where are we? So just managing everything. At the time, it felt horrible. Like, why is it that my friends, like, are rolling into school with a brand new Volvo? And, like, here I am. Like, my brother's, like, old beat-up Impala. Like, like... Ugh, what's going on? Like, and now we're all working and we're sweating. But in hindsight, I'm like so grateful that we got to do that and that we got to do it as a family.
And at one point, your brother is driving you around through like Winfield, and Alexander Estates, and what's he telling you?
So I was telling George earlier that so I'm in high school and all my friends are doing policy, and I think pursuing the law degree is like, no offense to lawyers. I think lawyers are amazing and I think it's great. But I think I always had a spirit in me where I'm like, that doesn't feel, it's not my thing. Like, I don't want to be in an office all day. Like, it's not what you see in the movies. You're basically like reading and contracts and depositions. And I'm like, I don't think I want that for my day to day. So I wanted to be a filmmaker. I think at one point I wanted to be an actor. And my brother was like, when have you seen a Mexican woman director? Like, get real. So he'd pick me up from school and he'd take me to like the gated areas at Alexander States. He had friends who lived there and he'd be like, that house, that guy's a lawyer. That other house, that guy's a doctor. That other guy has like owns all these like warehouses. And he was really sort of like in the spirit of my dad, be like, set goals on like material success and like you get your mind off like the castles in the sky of the arts and get your ass to work and just figure it out. And there's value. I don't want to like,
because your dad taught you a really important lesson too, which is
he taught me several, but are you talking about the
hard work is its own reward?
Right. When we were in elementary school, my dad used to drop us off in the morning before going to work, and he'd ask us like, ¿Cómo te va a ir hoy? We're like, bien. No te va a ir bien. Te va a ir excelentemente bien. And that was always like our cue, right? Like you're not just gonna have a good day, you're gonna have an excellently good day.
Yeah.
And his thing was always like, even if you end up selling tomatoes at the market, you're gonna be the best damn tomato seller that market has ever seen. Like, doing good work for the sake of it, without a reward, without a gold star, in spite of everything, like good work is its own reward. So that was always just very like drilled in us, like, and I think through everything we, through school, through extracurriculars, the pleasure of like going the extra mile and seeing the difference, like the subtle difference that like doing a little bit more does, it just makes all the difference in the world.
Right.
So my dad, tough cookie. Like, I don't want to glamorize anything. For those who know my dad out there, he's very like direct man, tough man. But I think he really made all three of us the people that we are today.
And so your oldest sister, because you're the baby, right? Mm-hmm. She also, just kind of through true grit, ends up making it up into the ranks of Disney. How does she do that?
So my sister, she's the middle child. My brother is the eldest. My sister was a soccer star. She went to United High School. Her freshman year was in the varsity team. Always knew, out of all three of us, I think she's the most disciplined, the most organized, the all-star human being. After graduating TAMU, she gets a semester at Disney World. She does an intern college program and does really well. But then her time there ended, and she had an option, like either I go back to Laredo and keep helping the family business, or I remained out here and forged my own path. So she kept on knocking on doors and ended up getting a data entry job at the merchandise. So basically, like when you go to Disney and you buy the souvenirs, you get the keychains and blah 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 blah, all the little things. Every one of those things needs to be accounted for, every single one. So that was her job. But after a few years, she was able to get a change of status through, she was also like me. She had a student visa and then like a work permit after she graduated, applied for a green card. And in that period, she had that day job at Disney, but not enough for like sustain her life. So she had a second job at a hotel. And she was just a hustler, man, like really
And
hustler.
could you see the hustle? Like,
Yeah.
and did that, hey, if my sister can do it, like me too.
100%.
Yeah.
My sister is an angel. Like, I think, like, if you believe in God or not, like, God really gave us, my whole family, they're all really good people, I think.
Yeah.
But she's just really kind. I think if, her friend group she was always a person who attracted a lot of light and positivity, never really had beef with anybody. So I think it's important to like not only see the example, but to feel the support. I think I always, I think my dad and my brother, as amazing as they are, always like just had that more masculine, tough energy, which is good and has value. But having my sister and my mom have the very nurturing, supportive energy was like critical. Because
you knew you had like you could like if things didn't work out, you had something to fall back to, or
I
like
think
how
'cause it just makes you not feel alone. I think when it's so important to have, we're making the movie on Jenny Lozano, and it's been a true privilege to just to follow her journey behind the scenes, behind what people see in the headlines. And that girl's story, like, she has the best family, like the best mom, the best sister, who in the worst moments, she lost at the Olympics, to people, her whole family too, like the man as well. But the women were just there like, hey, you're not alone, eres chingona, no te vas a rajar, no, like, so what if you lost? Like, you're just going to let this define you? No. And I found a lot of similarities in Jenny's and my path in that way, because it was my sister and the women in my family who gave me that as well.
Could you tell us a little bit about how you got involved in that documentary, and what's it about? What are you trying to show by filming that?
Totally. So, how I got involved with that film, I think it started, so I've been working in film production since, at 19, I get my first job, and up until now, I'm 29. At the time, I was 28 when we started following Jenny. And I felt that now I have a very solid training and foundation to understand film production. But up until this point, I've been helping other people make their projects, science fair included. Like, I'm very proud and grateful for the team I worked with. But to a certain degree, it feels like I can't fully claim it. It's not my, I helped be a part of the story. But Karen, what stories do you want to tell? What's the true creative vision that you want to put out in the world, into the zeitgeist of the Laredo imagination, the U.S. imagination? So I've been working on another project following rural kids along South Texas, and through the application of, trying to find grants and support for that project, I see there's a lot of opportunities for sports storytelling. And I had learned about Jenny's story in the paper, but for some reason I was like, I feel like somebody else is already going to do it. And I was right. Somebody else did beat me to the punch, but that's not a bad thing. It ended up being a good friend that I had already met through the Film Society, Nick Lewis, who about a month prior to me reaching out to Jenny, he had gotten in touch with her. So I write to Jenny and I tell her, hey, I'm a documentary filmmaker from Laredo, based out of New York City, and I'm really interested in following you. Could you let me, want to hop on a call? She ignored me. I think she was like super busy with some things, until another friend and local photographer connected us, said like, hey, Karen's been trying to reach you. Oh yeah, sorry, I hadn't seen the message. And in that first phone call, she's like, I've been working. Yes, you sound great, Karen. You instilled trust in me. Like, she felt that she could trust me.
Yeah.
But I'm already working with Nick. So I call Nick like the next day, and I'm like, hey, how do you feel if we collaborate? And of course, Nick, being the collaborative soul that he is and being so great, he was down. He actually told me that he was thinking of reaching out to me as well. So there was some really nice synchronicity there. And we start, and it's like, okay, manos a la obra.
And so that production, the Traviesa production, it's a small production, right? And your other productions were part of a larger crew. What's the difference? What's the biggest difference that you've seen working with a small group versus, being part of a huge production?
Crudely, money. Network, like the Nat Geo show was like, we had salaries, like we had access to like the best of the best gear, access to teams, locations, hotels. And with independent filmmaking, you have to build it from scratch. But I think it's been in the spirit of, like, earlier George and I were talking about all the odds being against you. It's almost like that's part of the recipe for really good things, because the harder the journey, the more, like, the sweeter the result.
So it's more difficult, but it's
financially difficult, but there's also a lot of things that are easier to do when you're more indie than when you have like all the red tape of networks. And we have a lot more creative freedom than we did with Science Fair, for example. Science Fair had to go through like so many different executives at Nat Geo, and the series won an Emmy, so it's like it was good feedback. Obviously the show had merit on its own. But I think it's different. I think as an artist, you want to protect your creative vision as much as you can, and not really be bought by a big check, by whoever signs the checks.
You were a producer on the other shows, and yeah. you've done Messi's
World Cup, The Rise of a Legend.
Messi's World Cup, and you've done a couple of other ones, right? And what role have you played in those?
So for the Messi's series, I was an associate producer. So it's still a producer, but on a junior role. I worked on Journey. I think I gigged. I took as many gigs as I could through college. Commercials.
And Journey
indie.
was a movie that was filmed for the most part
Laredo.
Here in Laredo, right? And the city of Laredo supported it financially and in other ways. And was that your first?
That was my very first. My very first experience on a film set.
And like, how did you get your foot in the door on that one?
So we're jumping around in the timeline a little bit, but so I go to St. Edward's. St. Edward's tells me, you're too poor, you can't be here, go back home. I go to Laredo College. I see that there's an article in the paper around sometime in June by Gabriela A. Trevino, a reporter at the Laredo Morning Times, who says independent production from Houston is looking for actors. And I'm like, what? There's a production? They're actually making a movie in Laredo? I'm like, what? Like, this is my chance. So I go to the audition. There's a casting tape out there somewhere of me like reading lines. But as soon as I get out of the audition, I go to the producers and I'm like, psych. Like, I had no interest in being an actor in your movie, but hire me as anything. I'll bring your coffee. I'll be an assistant, like anything you want. I know these streets well. This is my hometown. I'll get you anything you need. I really want to learn how movies get made. And so they didn't call me back. I had to like follow up again and always be this like super annoying squeaky wheel that doesn't take no for an answer. And
that's the path to glory.
That's the path, yeah.
You have to do that.
And they did, they like about 2 weeks later, they're like, hey, come to an interview at the Marriott on Jackman. I forget the specific name of the hotel, but whatever. Like, they call me, I go, and I help them find a warehouse. I help them find actors. I help them with like map out the scene structure and the schedule, and got really involved with the planning of that project. And what else?
Footnote, your brother ends up coming out in that movie. And you showed me a clip of it. And
it was very funny.
He did great. I mean, he did great. And so the guy that was originally giving you a tour in the Impala on gated communities ends up in the first movie that you're a part of.
Yeah. Oh my goodness, that's so funny.
And so it begins. Okay, and so then?
Well, that was it. I mean, I worked in Journey, and having been a participant in NHI, which was this like leadership program that as a staff member you got to see sort of how the sausage got made. I was like, oh, like whereas NHI is this thing of envisioning policy, film sets are like envisioning like visions and messages and arts. And if you learn how to run a set properly, you get all these other important life skills. So that's to answer your first question. It's like that's where the light bulb sort of like goes off, and I'm like, I think there's a real pathway into the arts through independent filmmaking. And it wasn't until I saw people in Houston and other people in other Texas communities doing it that it started to be clear, like, oh, you can do it. And then I learned that there was Sledge TV, which shout out Rudy, Chris, Roly, Victor, Gabby, these like local artists who were just passionate about video production that were making music videos. And I'm like, oh, we think that Laredo is this like conservative, boring town where nothing ever happens. But if you just dig a little deeper, you find like-minded people who are passionate and are just getting to work. And yeah, maybe like their work's not on these like shiny places, but their work's really good. And that's worth looking at and talking to them.
Sludge TV.
Sledge. SLEDGE.
And you can find that on
YouTube, Facebook, Instagram. And then you just learn that, hey, if you just ask questions, you learn that there's actually a history of other creatives that you can learn from. So after St. Edward's, that happens, and I work on Journey, and then July comes around, the production ends, and I meet all these wonderful creatives from Laredo. I go to my next semester at LCC. I graduate with an associate's, and after graduating, I had a work permit through my visa, and I meet a friend who tells me, hey, KGNS is hiring. So I go become a production assistant at KGNS and learn all of that, and oh, this is how cameras work, and this is what tilt and panning and zoom and news production, and you have to wake up early, and sometimes I was very late for work. I'm sorry to my old bosses. I had the very early morning shift, but it just like really started solidifying for me. I think what I really enjoy about my path is that no matter what your dream is, if you sort of like remove all the assumptions of what you think the path is and start looking at what's in front of you, you can really move toward whatever that vision or whatever that goal is. And whether that's in the arts or engineering or science or law, like you can really move toward that.
Was there ever a moment where you were no longer in fear of the unknown, where you began to just kind of embrace like whatever it was around the bend, or was that always
that's still here? Like my dad posted on Facebook about the Emmy, and like it's sort of like two things at once. Like, yes, I'm proud of it, but I'm also like a little very like overwhelmed by the attention and the expectation that comes with that, because like I'm still hustling to get Traviesa finished. We are still, if anyone's watching this, like we need your support. Go donate.
Yeah.
TraviesaDocumentary.com. We still need money. Part of the freelance lifestyle of film production. Sometimes you get these amazing projects, but then sometimes you get seasons where like the market's really dry and you don't. And I think the more you do it, the more as to your point, you understand that you learn to ride the wave of discomfort and instability. But to say that fear is gone would be a lie. But courage is acting in spite of fear.
Right.
And I think when you really work from a place of passion, the fear gets easy to bear. So I'm fortunate that I have this fire inside me that just keeps me going. I don't know what I would do without it.
Okay, so you mentioned that you live in New York.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that stands out to me. Why New York? And do you live full time over there, or you come back here? Like, what are you doing here in Laredo if you're living in New York as well?
So I moved to New York in 2021. After Journey and after KGNS, I work at a local architecture firm doing media and doing sort of like, I did videos. I got to learn a lot about the Laredo community, the needs of our community. I think, especially, I would assume that a lot of the people who watch this podcast are maybe a little bit in tune with, the challenges, the water challenges, air quality, and like the local politics. Early on, it became apparent to me that there's a real need to build advocacy networks to get. If we depend on leadership, on elected leadership to do it, we're going to be waiting around forever.
Right.
So what we really need is strong networks of solidarity among advocates that are passionate about food, mobility, social justice, economic justice. So through my architecture job, I was able to work with really passionate people as well who really cared about Laredo. And this was 2016, so the Viva Laredo Comprehensive Plan was happening. It was the first time I saw as a Laredoan the question, like just the question of like, what's your vision for the future? I think it's a very powerful question. I've been listening to meditation in the mornings, and that's like, be guided by a vision of the future, not a memory of the past, and try to live your day.
Sounds like Joe Dispenza.
Yeah, there you go.
He's the man.
Joe Dispenza's my...
You have to visualize it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and I remember, on council, I would, I could see the trees being a buffer between the street and the sidewalks. I could see the sidewalks shaded. I could see people riding their bikes. I could see a city that prioritized public transportation. And it was kind of my, warm blanket that I would cocoa wash myself with, and, not in the public sphere anymore, but still that's a powerful tool. And so then what is that vision of the future that you have?
I think, I don't want to say something too controversial, but it's what I believe. But
this is a safe space for controversy. Yeah.
I think we have bought the narrative that this place is a border, that this place is a place with so much abundant violence that we need to protect our people from, that we put so much money into that same narrative and militarizing our border at the expense of crucial public health needs. From Laredo to Brownsville, we have the highest Alzheimer's rate in the country among Latinos. And they're still trying to figure out why, but it's something to do with contamination of our water, which therefore feeds into our crops. It also has to do with lack of public health. How many doctors, like we have like 2 cardiologists or however many that we have, because we haven't built an environment where we think life can be sustained in this corridor of the borderlands. A good friend of mine, Liz Montiel, wrote a poem shortly after the first Trump administration. And whatever, like, I'm not here to talk about Trump or whatever, but her poem was about the grief of the border being this place where you start to grow a flower, but then the moment that flower starts to bloom, it's like, boom, it gets squashed. Mm-hmm. We just don't think good things can happen here. Mm-hmm. How many times have you heard somebody be like, por eso Laredo no progresa?
Yeah.
And we've just accepted that. And when you just repeat a message so many times, you just don't even question it. And so many things that could easily not be the reality just get like, por ahí se van. So my vision for the future is a reality rooted in prosperity, where that's no longer I think my calling as a filmmaker is to challenge that, to show that there's other narratives that exist here that make us strong and they don't make us weak.
The other thing that Dispenza says, if you want to change your personal reality, you have to change your personality. Like because been locked in that algorithm of division and kind of like nailing down, those who bear responsibility for some of the really bad policy that we've seen in play, and just kind of noticing how that tends to create more of the same, right? So I guess adopting that Jesus and Barabbas conversation, forgive them, Lord, they know not what they do. But this is the really cool stuff we're working on, and having those conversations, because if you think about the border, where else in the United States, where I-35 meets the Rio Grande, do you have this amalgamation of culture in such a diverse way where you celebrate both Frank Sinatra and Vicente Fernandez? Like, usually it's either or, you know what I mean? But here, like, we get to have it all. And it is so diverse, and it is so complex, and you can choose, well, the river divides us, or the common source of water, it actually unites us in many, many more ways than it does. Or those immigrants, and I was talking to this rancher who's very much pro-Trump, but they deported his cowboy, right? And they don't make cowboys in the U.S. like they make cowboys in Mexico. And so now he's all, man, he's like, wait a minute, don't deport my cowboy, you deport all those other folks. But so, well then, because we're so interconnected, as neighbors, as across the globe. I mean, we're seeing a lot of things from a climate change standpoint where, you think, oh, well, all that coal they're burning in China, that's really bad for the environment. Well, yeah, well, so was all those clicks on Amazon to buy that Chinese crap, right? And then, oh, by the way, LA, our brothers across the country, they're experiencing devastation and Santa Ana winds and just like apocalyptic biblical grade decimation. And, it's not because there wasn't fire in the fire hydrants. I mean, that's kind of more like that's the failed to plan to fail. But if drilling down on the root causes, there's this big mirror staring back, and well, okay. And to your Emmy, to these kids that you hung out with, because you had to hang out with them, right? Mm-hmm. And you had to like really figure out, among all of these super compelling, stories, what are the best of the best. And one of the things you said that like it clicked, like, here are all these kids solving adult problems that the adults left behind for them. Like, if it ain't them, it's not going to be us. But that kind of that like, are we spiritualist? Are we materialist? Like what is it that we're supposed to become? I mean, because the algorithm has us designed to be good consumers, and being a good consumer, it's not going to help you level up. Actually, to your point about the films, that when you don't have the big budget, and you have to get a lot more creative, and that's where that true grit really shines, and that DNA ends up getting baked into that end product that makes for such a compelling story, because it wasn't just given to you. Like, you had to like figure it out and earn it. What is it that you took away from working with those very talented kids, and set the table a little bit, because not everybody's familiar with the program. There's a 3-part series. Mm-hmm. Tell us a little bit about the program, the science fair itself.
Totally. I think, wow, that show gave me so much. So we followed high school students that are competing at ISEF, Regeneron ISEF. And ISEF stands for the International Science and Engineering Fair, which, if you win ISEF as a student, is like winning the Nobel Prize as a high school kid. Very competitive. Chuck Schumer attended it as a high school student. AOC, the famous Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, attended it as a high school student. And our own series director, Cristina, was also an ISEF kid herself. So the kids that are attending these programs are like very, very sharp cookies. The majority of them, I don't have any data on it, but I would say like the overwhelming majority probably get accepted into Ivy League institutions, and just like really prestigious, like, kids that are going to change the world, and they're already doing it. So I stayed on the project long enough. I started as a junior producer and associate producer, and was again this like stubborn squeaky wheel that, after principal production wrapped, there were still all these other things to do, and I was like, I want to remain involved. The leadership of the team, I think this is the exception, sadly not the norm of the film industry, but they were super kind people, like egoless, like Not really. Creative industries, sadly, do get to draw a lot of, oh, I have the best idea, blah, blah, blah. But this team was not like that at all. So because I stayed longer, I worked with students in Jericho, New York, so a place in Long Island, Port Lucie in Florida, Puerto Rico, Alamosa County in Colorado, a rural area of Colorado. And yeah, I think those were mainly. We also followed some students in Zimbabwe, but I didn't get to participate in the casting or process of that.
What's your role exactly? You said you junior producer in
I
the
started
show?
as an associate producer, but because I stayed longer, I was able to advocate and negotiate a producer credit by the end of the role.
And what does that entail?
A producer, think of it as like, if you're in a restaurant and you have the chef being like, look, this is the dinner that's going to be served today, but then you have all these like line cooks and people that are, okay, we got to prep, we got to, get the tomatoes and get the chiles and the salt and set that's the producer is the person that translates the creative vision into a tangible shooting schedule.
I see.
And all the things that are involved with that. So we had very clear direction from Christina and Darren, our directing team. And they really trusted us to like, okay, well, you guys are talented, go build those relationships with the school districts and with the teachers and with the kids' families. And we had to plan that. Basically, a producer is in charge of, okay, we're going to be filming for 3 days. I got to make sure that my director of photography, who's the guy behind the camera, is coming in from California and he gets in on time and we got to go pick him up at the airport and then take him to the hotel. And then everybody has the place where they're staying and their per diem and everything stays within budget and basically all the little things that like nobody thinks about but that are so fundamental to a successful production. That's what a producer does.
Great.
So my background in kitchen and hospitality was like my film school, the perfect thing to train me to be good at like, okay, gotta manage a lot of moving parts to get the shot. So it was amazing. I mean, science fair the kids I think are just, it fills you with hope. I think when the team got the Emmy, Christina and Darren and the whole executive team were at the ceremony, and Christina delivered a very powerful speech where she quotes Carl Sagan saying, "It is suicidal to live in a society dependent on science and technology, where hardly anybody knows a thing about science and technology." But the kids of the series really give us hope in that we're going to be okay. I worked on another project that addresses climate change and the political will that really gets in the way of solutions. But the solutions exist. The solutions have existed for a long time. It's really the adults and the human ego and the power of industry that gets in the way of getting us there. But
and I think that we're such materialists. Mm-hmm. We're such consumers, and that we value things versus experiences or the real legacy of leaving behind a hospitable planet. And in many ways, again, I mean, the mirror, I'm holding it up to my face because I've been in that consumption wheel. And I just watched this phenomenal film called 180 Degrees South. It's about the founder of Patagonia, the clothing line, Yvon Chouinard. And he says, the most complicated thing you'll ever do in your life is to simplify it. And when you look at what he ended up doing later in life, which was basically divesting himself of Patagonia, and figuring out a legal system that he could just give the profits away to things that would address climate change, and then buying large swaths of South America and then just giving it over to big land trusts that would work with governments to keep the land preserved in perpetuity. But one of the things he said that really stuck out, and it kind of goes, I know we're brainstorming on a film we're collaborating on, but what he said, what Yvon Chouinard said, he said, what I'm really trying to do here is save my own soul. And that to me like really stood out. Like, okay, well, what are we really doing here? Like, okay, because in our different ways we're involved in the arts. And interestingly, Carlos, your story in part was how Your dad, my Theo, was adamant about you getting that law degree, right? And passing that bar exam. And we'll talk about all your creative exploits later. But first things first, you better have something to fall back on, right?
Right.
And I think that's a common refrain for so many of our parents that did get their education back then. And it was the pathway to being able to send your kids to college, right? Like, okay, well, you've got a base now, right? And the artistic exploits were, those are for, the dreamers. But realistically, like, the dreamers are the ones that bring ideas to light. I forget who said it. Maybe Kierkegaard. I forget who said it. But famously, the quote is, the poets are the unelected legislators, right? Like they're the ones that back then they were making the law, right? And Hollywood over the years has delivered us, I think, kind of just garbage. I mean, even look at all the post-apocalyptic the genre itself, right? Terminator, and now we've got AI coming around, and like all these almost self-fulfilling themes, prophecies. But then you have that other side of Hollywood, like Eugenio Derbez, who's writing movies and telling stories about how love conquers it all. And you've got these big dreamers. I mean, my mom, in many respects, followed her heart. Lived in poverty. Many ways, kind of still does. But like she wrote Laredo's month after month and just followed that dream, and everything else kind of sorted itself out. And recently, Carlos and I had the conversation, and we touched on it a little bit about how, when you do what you love, money is just like a natural byproduct of, like, when you're, like what Paulo Coelho said, when you're living your life's purpose, the universe conspires to help you. And I think, Carlos, you're kind of straddling both sides of that.
And I think I forgot the name of that pyramid of
Maslow's
needs.
hierarchy.
Maslow's hierarchy, and
yeah.
I think you need a base level of sustenance before you can begin to think creatively.
Yeah, it's air, water, food, shelter, acceptance, like being part of a tribe, and then eventually it's self-actualization is at the top of that pyramid,
right?
Which is that hard work is its own reward. Like, I'm doing what I love, and because I've got those needs covered. What's your take on money, or having your means provided for? Is it just kind of a natural byproduct of living your life's purpose?
I think my instinct is to go with your take, George, of like, when you really pursue, at least in my life that's been the case, but I think that could also be a romantic view of it, because thank you, because it's true. It's like, especially like when you think of progressive policy, like a big plight of the progressive movement is economic justice. And it's like, how can I sit here and tell somebody who's like doesn't have running water, like, just keep going, like, pursue your dreams, like, it's almost offensive to like take that position. I think two things can be true at the same time. I don't think your drive should ever be material. Jim Carrey said it. You should watch this documentary called Jim and Andy, where it's about Andy Kaufman and Jim Carrey reflecting on his time playing the role of Andy Kaufman for the film Man on the Moon. And he's reflecting on that period. And then he says, I had a very successful period in my life where he filmed like The Mask, Dumb and Dumber, and I forget which third movie that was very, very successful. And he's like, I had everything. I had absolutely I wish every person in the world could get everything they ever wish for, so that they could know that's not the answer.
Mm-hmm.
So I think being driven by material success isn't why we came to this planet. Like, the fact that we're alive is a miracle, as a species, as anyone that's out there. But I do think it is our collective responsibility to make sure that everybody has the means to live that reality, because when you don't have food, we're and climate wise, it's gonna get harsher. We're gonna get like horrible winters. How many people died in the last freeze here in Laredo? Things that we're not prepared for. Like, it is our collective responsibility to make sure that people are protected.
And even this last summer, the Hotel Hamilton, that the Laredo Housing Authority manages, their air conditioners were down during the summer. And because I work downtown, going in and out of the courthouse, you would see the ambulance there just picking up bodies just regularly throughout the summer. And even the city just not having, the housing authority and being enabled by the city not having just that common decency to care about the least among us. And I mean, what Martin Luther King said, an injustice anywhere is an injustice everywhere. Their poverty is your poverty. Like when you drive by that homeless guy, or you see that elderly person, that's you. And so who's going to be taking care of us when we're up in age, right? Is it going to be a bunch of robots that are just going to be like, you no longer have utility to this system as a consumer or producer, therefore you're not needed. Can we take your kidneys, please? Or I don't know what that Hollywood model is, but that Hollywood model seems to keep coming up in so many of our conversations, and that's not the narrative. The narrative is these kids, and I haven't seen the series yet. Can someone go on to Disney Plus, or where can you find it right now?
Sadly, we learned that the network pulled it from the platform. I'm not entirely sure why. My assumption is something to do with maybe the license expired and they have to buy the rights again, or maybe they had different things in mind that algorithms and computers determine, like, oh, not enough people are watching it, but stay tuned. Maybe we can. There's been a lot of interest locally, at least, so hopefully there can be plans for a watch party or any other way to get the story out.
And you got it scored with an 8.8 on IMDb.
On IMDb.
So for those that don't know, Internet Movie Database, imdb.com, is kind of like the, that's your pedigree as a filmmaker or an actor or producer. So me personally, I won't go to the theater to see anything below a 7.0. And I don't consider myself a snob. I'll go slum it at my house and see some garbage every now and then, although I am a little bit more careful. But to get, for instance, that movie, The Departed, there's, some of you, the really big, I think one of the Batman's got an 8.0. To hit a level of acting, storytelling, and production, to even just get an 8.0 is a Herculean feat. The last Gladiator 2 got a 6.8, and that's Ridley Scott, right? Got a 6.8. Denzel Washington and Ridley Scott, and all they were able to pull off was a 6.8. Y'all's Emmy award-winning piece had an 8.8. To get an 8.8, the level of peer review and viewer review that goes into getting an 8.8. When I saw it, I was like, holy, first of all, it's so cool that you have an IMDb page. I'm I'm a little bit giddy, she's on IMDb. I don't think we've ever had anybody on our podcast that's on IMDb, let alone met too many people. But that's really because I remember when you were a comprehensive plan Viva Laredo advocate, and I still remember you showing up to city council and trying to speak truth to power and speaking truth to power, not trying but doing so. And think, wow, that's really cool. Look at all the chutzpah and this young lady, coming up here. And then fast forward 10 years or so, I guess, right? It was
a little less, but yeah.
Little less. And here we are now, sipping mezcal, talking about your IMDb page and this 8.8. Cheers to that. Cheers to that. Here's to success and the health and all the beauty that this little border city has to give.
It has a lot. Yeah.
How does living in New York influence your view on Laredo? How has it changed your view on the border city and the art scene here?
It makes my love for Laredo stronger. I think it's very comfortable for a New Yorker to be like, oh, look at all these galleries in Chelsea, and let me go to this, world famous film festival, whatever. Maybe I'll skip it. There will be another one tomorrow. But George and I were talking about this, I think maybe a couple of years ago when I had just moved to New York. But people give New York a lot of credit. If you can make it in New York, you can make it anywhere. But I think it's the opposite. If you can make beauty in Laredo, you can make it anywhere. Because this place, by like forces dictated by things outside of us, it's not the easiest to grow up in. It's not the easiest to thrive in. Sometimes our own self-inflicting wounds prevent us. Sometimes we're our own worst enemies. Sometimes we're each other's worst enemies. We are so driven by the algorithm and the Facebook fights, and this business closed down and this politician did this. That
a lot of drama.
So much drama. Drama like fuels our social existence.
It's a big, small town.
Mm-hmm. But all roads lead to Laredo. Every institution outside of Laredo rejected me, but it was Laredo College that embraced me. It was the local arts community that showed me there was a thriving life. There were good people. People in San Ignacio that created an oasis in the middle of nowhere just because they valued history and they valued memory. This place is a blank canvas. New York doesn't need me. I live there because career-wise, I was able to get jobs there, and there's infrastructure to support my career. But since I've moved to the city in 2021, I've never spent more than half the year in New York. I've always either been traveling for work or have come back for the Laredo Film Society when I was an active board member. I had to step off the leadership last year to pursue co-directing Traviesa full time. But this place, these are my roots. And while I'm very grateful that there's all this attention and not attention, but the support. I was terrified of the news of the Emmy coming out because I'm like, there's so many haters in Laredo.
Right.
But it's been so much love. It's been validating because I think we try to do good things, like the Laredo Film Society crew. We try to just plant love back into the community. I just hope that we can get that, we can learn that we can make that sort of excellent work here about stories from here. If we just get over our own egos and open our eyes and pay attention to the beauty that does exist here, because there's a lot.
Yeah, I like how you said that Laredo is a blank canvas.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that's so true. A lot of people that live here, they're very negative and they expect, what is there to do? Give me something to do. And if you don't give it to me, I'm going to leave. I'm going to go to Austin. I'm going to go to San Antonio because they have it there, right? But like you said, it's a blank canvas. And I mean, we can, if you want to do something, like you were mentioning before, you have to have that image in your mind and you can make it.
100%.
And what would you say to somebody that wants to get into production, for example? How do they get there?
Work with what you have. Shoot whatever, my journey starts with the movie journey. I just talked to anybody who would listen. After I was working at the architecture firm, and even though my role was to do a lot of community engagement, there was a need to update the website. There was a need to, they're doing all these great projects on urban planning. Let me make a little video about it. Take initiative. Don't let the world tell you no. You have a phone, you have YouTube. I didn't go to film school. I just had to learn with what was around me. Read the newspaper, really read the newspaper, find out what stories are being told. Read anything, just expand your mind, feed your mind. and stay authentic. I think protecting your voice is the most valuable thing that we can do.
That's great. I like that.
You had mentioned our neighbors here, Val and Chris, right? Like they didn't have, and this is to your point, Carlos, like they didn't have the space that they wanted, so they made it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they didn't have a little cafe where you could just jump in and get a little salad and a sandwich, and so they made it. And they didn't have a beer garden that was gritty and had live music and a great selection of local and exotic beers. So they made it.
Mm-hmm.
So I think so many Laredoans had done the same thing, especially ones that had gone off and they'd come back. Because the canvas is so wide open, they made it. I mean, I remember when something I think as benign as a Shipley's or a Dunkin' Donuts like reopened on the north side of town or opened for the first time, and these big long lines, because there was nothing here, and so you could open even kind of the most uninteresting thing, and because there was nothing else there, it did really, really well. And the same holds true for Mr. Kirkpatrick's leather shop. The same holds true for, I think, pick your profession or your merchant. You can make Laredo be whatever you want it to be. I mean, I practice a lot in federal court, and I look at some of my colleagues and the judges, and these are like world-class, lawyers that, and everybody always says, oh, well, you got to go, you got to go out of town to get, a good lawyer. And I've been out of town. And I've worked with some of those lawyers, and I've seen the guys here locally working, and we've got just a tremendous amount of world-class talent. I would argue the best talent in South Texas because of that binational influence, even just thinking in another language and what that brings to the fold and being able to communicate in the nuance of Spanish and Spanglish. We've got just so much to give. And we have such a complex, adverse, hostile at times environment to operate in that you get good at getting good. And so when you look at a lot of Laredo's best exports, and it's not the refrigerators and vehicles coming through, because that's not ours, but it's the human talent. I mean, Chito Vela, a lawyer from Laredo, he's a city councilman in Austin. Amado Peña, phenomenal artist from Laredo who went and made it really big. You've got Grammy award-winning Adrian Quesada and Grupo Fantasma. It's kind of a border amalgamized, group. But Adrian's from Laredo. Dean Zaffarini, who's the dean of the Senate. We've got like these real powerful people, not because they wield power, but because they grew up and had these humble beginnings and went off and did really good things with the lessons that were hard learned here at home. Mm-hmm. And a lot of them have come back, thankfully, and are now, cross-pollinating.
I recently learned, I want to add Siete Foods, who
oh my gosh,
recently, oh my goodness,
and yeah.
What a success story.
Yes.
Jenny was in the Olympic Center in Colorado when her trainer takes her some like Siete Food like chips, and it's like, did you know these people were from Laredo? And she looks at the back and it's like, oh my God, the guy is a family.
Yes.
Like, what a success story. Like, that's the next movie if they let us film them.
Yes.
They're so amazing.
And they are amazing. And I remember when they had the G7 gym, and they were selling these tortillas out of their gym, and they were like guilt-free, tortillas, and they're phenomenal. I put some butter and honey on them. I mean, even now you just go to the grocery store and get them out of the frozen food section, but they're not using bad oil. They're using good ingredients, and that's been one of our best and brightest exports was Siete.
I want to shout somebody else out whose story I learned about recently. I haven't had the pleasure to meet this person yet. I think his brother and I went to middle school together, but Arturo Elizondo, he's an entrepreneur who started there's this big fancy restaurant, 11 Madison Park. He didn't invent that restaurant. He didn't start it. But 11 Madison Park is a 3 Michelin star restaurant that has won like literally like best restaurant in the world. Like it's beat like restaurants in France and restaurants in like all these fancy places. This chef, Daniel Hume, is a rock star chef, very famous, hangs out with like Cristiano Ronaldo, like I don't know, just like all these very famous people, right? But he made headlines during the pandemic because it was the first fine dining restaurant to transition off meat. Like they don't have, it's an entirely like a fine dining plant-based menu.
Oh, wow.
11 Madison Park. Arturo Elizondo, a United High School graduate, he invented an egg that is like a lab-grown egg that has now signed to be the exclusive like produce supplier to 11 Madison Park, the world's best restaurant. And it started with a kid from United High School.
Wow. Yeah.
There's so much talent here. And we need to like get over our fucking egos and like embrace and nurture and support each other.
Yeah.
Because, you know, we're just gonna get in our own way of survival if we don't.
Right. So what I wanted to wrap with was that your dad, Edgar Gaytan, who was very matter of fact and kind of critical and wanting you to pursue a conventional career path, here just the other day posts on his Facebook feed, Edgar Gaytan is celebrating success with Karen Gaytan and Nelly Méndez. En Estados Unidos existen 4 tipos de galardones a la excelencia que abarcan la industria del entretenimiento: el Oscar, cinematografía; el Grammy, música; el Tony, teatro; y el Emmy, televisión. Estamos muy orgullosos y contentos ya que nuestra hija Karen Gaytan fue la productora del equipo que ganó el Emmy al documental en ciencia y tecnología con Science Fair, The Series. Estos logros ya son palabras mayores. He goes on to say that realmente nos haces sentir, Karencita, muy orgullosas de ti. And he concludes with, de hecho, ni le gusta que ponga post como este, pero ya lo hice. Aún no entiende lo maravilloso que se siente tener hijos como los que tenemos. Fin de la publicación.
Yeah. Shout out, Dad.
That's a good feeling when your parents tell you, hey, I'm really proud of you. And it's a reminder to all the parents out there listening, don't forget to remind your kids how proud you are of them. Yeah, even if all they did was what they were supposed to do anyway, just keep on like giving that nurturing support. Also keep pushing them, right? Like keep pushing them, because sometimes even when you're pushing in a direction that they don't want to go in, that push serves as contrast. And plus, it's not supposed to be easy. If it is easy, then you didn't earn it. And it doesn't have value unless you earn it.
Absolutely.
I think that's good. I think that's... Thank you so much for being here with us.
Of course, it's a pleasure. That's a wrap.
Yeah.
As they say in your
in film
line
production
of business.
Yeah.
Great.
No, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for accepting the invitation and sharing your story, which in many ways I think is, our story, right? And so it's inspiring.